Okay, not really an apology. Whatever. Again, we have with us the opportunity to connect our generation with the times that have come before us. Dr. Jacob Eisenbach was born in Lodz in Poland as well, connected to yesterday, in 1923. He comes from a family with 4 children and a loving extended family of about 100. He had a wonderful childhood until the war started in 1939 and the nightmare began. He survived the Holocaust by a number of miraculous events. He only just recently retired from the practice of dentistry at the age of 92 and leads a very active life, giving speeches and enjoying a busy social schedule and traveling. He'll be speaking today about his astonishing life in Nazi captivity for 5 years, his survival and his life in freedom. Please give your fullest attention and silence and respect. Please be seated if you aren't already, as quickly as you possibly can, and give your fullest attention to Dr. Eisenbach.
Thank you very much so much.
Can you hear me well in the back? Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to this lovely group, students and leadership of the Chabad movement. I attend the Chabad temple in Yorba Linda, California. Rabbi Yezri is the rabbi there, great rabbi, and Rabbi Levi, his son-in-law. Before the war started in 1939, September 1st, Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with Stalin. So he decided to divide Poland. The Nazis would take Western Poland, and the Soviets would take Eastern Poland, and they would not interfere with each other's activities. On September 1st, completely unexpectedly, Poland was attacked. Within 7 days, they occupied my hometown of Lodz, which was and is the second largest city in Poland. And the entire war in Poland, less than 3 weeks, the Nazis were armed to their teeth, and the Polish army was completely unprepared for this attack. As soon as they occupied Lodz, which is a city of about 750,000 people, and half of them were Jews, the Nazis started building a ghetto. Now we were ordered to move into that ghetto by May 1st, 1940, which was just a few months after the war started. And we were ordered to be inside that ghetto by May 1st. Any Jew found outside the ghetto after May 1st would be shot to death on the spot. Many of the Jewish people escaped to the Russian part of Poland because whatever the Russians did, they did not kill Jews. I come from a family of 4 children. The oldest one was my sister. and I was the oldest of 3 boys. None of the Jews escaped to the Russian part of Poland, including my sister. She left with a few of her girlfriends, and she went to the city of Lvov, occupied by the Russians. At first we had some mail communication with her, but that communication stopped completely. They isolated us completely from the rest of the world. There was no radio, there was no newspaper, there was no mail. And we did not know what was going on outside that ghetto. Once they locked up the ghetto hermetically, it was surrounded by barbed wire. Every 200 feet was a watchtower, guarded by Nazi soldiers with machine guns and searchlights. It was impossible to escape. The first thing they started doing is controlling our food supply. They gave us just enough food just to get by, and people were starving to death. They were dropping dead in the streets of the ghetto. And the first people who were dying were big men who needed more food than everybody else. Everybody was getting the same ration. And there was a typhus epidemic in the ghetto. One day, my youngest brother, Henry, at the age of 11, developed a high fever. And we had about 180,000 Jews in that ghetto. And we had our own doctors. And there are 2 hospitals in that part of the city before the war, and those hospitals were included in the ghetto. So my brother develops a high fever. We call a doctor. He takes a look at him and he says, "It looks like he has typhus. Take him to the hospital." So I took him to the hospital. And the next morning I had a job in the ghetto, and on my way to my job I passed one of the 2 hospitals, and what I saw is trucks being loaded with patients on top of each other, maybe 20 layers of live people on top of each other, guarded by Nazis with machine guns. When I saw that, I started running to the other hospital where my brother was, and on the way I passed by one of these trucks which had spaces between the boards to transport cattle, and that was loaded with people with 20 layers on top of each other. And I stopped for a moment to look to see if I can see my brother. I didn't see him. The driver had a companion in his driving compartment. The streets were deserted, and when he saw me watching that truck, he pulled out his rifle and started shooting against me. But I was in front of an apartment building. I ran into the building and he didn't get me. So he continued in his direction, I continued to the hospital. I got there and the same thing was happening there. You couldn't get into the hospital. So I went to the back of the hospital. There was a crowd of people there, and nurses were turning over patients to that crowd over the fence. It was an 8-foot fence. I climbed the 8-foot fence. I don't know how I did it to this day, but I did. And I went to the room where I took my brother in the day before, and he wasn't there. So I asked the nurses, "Where is my brother?" And they said, "Well, he was carried out about 15 minutes ago. He was in that truck." And I have never seen him again. All of these people went directly to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. After a while, my father received an order to report for deportation. And they were deporting people by trainloads almost every day from the ghetto. And at first, we didn't know where those people are going. They were told that they were going to work in all the camps. But that was a big lie. They went to the gas chambers. We found that out from the Polish train conductors who took those people to Auschwitz by the thousands. And they told us nobody ever comes out of there. And they could smell burning flesh from the smokestacks. So we knew what was going on. And my father was taken with 600 other men. And I have never seen him again. After the war, I found out what they did with those 600 men. There was one man that I met who survived the group. And he told me that they had those people carry heavy rocks from place to place, useless work on a starvation diet, and they all just died out. So that left one of my younger brothers and me. Because the rest of my family, I had a family of about 100 people, extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins. We had a very close family. And just my brother was left and me, and one day I received an order for deportation. That order was a death sentence, because we already knew what they are doing with those people who are deported. I did not report for deportation. I went into hiding with my brother. We were hiding in friends' places, in various places. My brother and I lived in a one-room apartment upstairs with wooden squeaking steps. And after a month of hiding, our neighbors were telling us that the police was there in my apartment. There was a padlock outside. They saw the padlock, they walked away, and they were there several times looking for me. Now, my brother was not ordered for deportation, only me. After a month, we ran out of places to hide. So we decided, since the police was there in our apartment several times and they saw the padlock and walked away, let's just go into that room. It was completely empty. We just put some straw in the corner, 20 below zero outside and 20 below zero inside. And a friend of ours put a padlock on the outside. And in the middle of the night, about midnight, we hear steps, boots, police boots, loud voices, 2 policemen coming up there. And one of the policemen says, well, you see, there's a padlock here, there's nobody here, let's go. And the other policeman was a wise guy, and he says, no, let's not go. Let's knock off that padlock and see what's inside. So they went downstairs, found the crowbar, knocked off the padlock, opened the door, and the first policeman had a flashlight. He looked around the room and he says to the other guy, well, there's nobody here, let's go. And the other guy says, no, let's not go, let's look in that corner. There was a pile, my brother and me, covered up. Well, they found me. And they were taking me to the train station for deportation. And my brother did not have to go, but he says to me, Jack, our entire family is now gone. Only you and I are left. I am not staying here by myself. No matter what happens to you, wherever you go, I go, knowing full well where we are going. And he went with me. That's the kind of a bond we had in our family. For 3 days and 3 nights we were in those cattle trains being transported to Auschwitz. At the end of 3 days, they ordered us to get out of the cars, train cars, and we were absolutely sure that we were in Auschwitz. We didn't know. But it wasn't Auschwitz. What happened is the Nazis lost 4 million men at the Battle of Stalingrad, and that was the turning point of the war. That was in March of 1944, when they took me out of that ghetto. And they were retreating from the Soviet Union. Because they lost so many people, they took their own people out of their war production to put them up on the front. And they decided those young Jews who are still able to work, instead of putting them into the gas chambers, we would put them to work in our war production. And where we ended up being was a munition factory and a concentration camp adjoining the munition factory. You know, that was a blessing in disguise with that bad policeman. Because 4 months later, in August of 1944, they liquidated the ghetto and sent all the people to Auschwitz. So it was a good thing that they took me out of the ghetto, and it was a miracle that we didn't end up in the gas chamber. After the war, I met a lady. She told me what happened to my sister in the city of Lvov. In 1941, 2 years after the war started, the Nazis broke the non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. And as you all know what happened, they attacked the Soviet Union against the advice of their top generals. Hitler wouldn't listen to them. And they occupied the city of Lvov, where my sister was, organized the ghetto. There were 110,000 Jews in that ghetto, and that lady, whom I met after the war, somehow managed to escape by a miracle. And she told me that the Nazis came in with machine guns one day and killed all 110,000 Jews in that ghetto in 3 days. My brother and I survived the war. On January 15, 1945, we could hear artillery shots. The Nazis were retreating and the Soviets were after them. And all of a sudden, at midnight, all the guards around in the watchtowers around the concentration camp, they just disappeared with their machine guns. They got orders to run because the Russians were after them. And they just left. And our Jewish chief of the camp told us, don't get out of the camp because you can hear bullets flying and artillery. It's dangerous out there. Wait till tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, on January 16th, my brother and I walk out of the camp free. First thing we were looking for was food. We found a Nazi truck loaded with food. And we're told not to eat much because our bodies were so starved that it was dangerous to eat much. We can get sick. So we had to do it gradually. My brother and I were Polish patriots. That was our country. We were born and raised there. I enrolled in the university in my hometown, in Lodz, and my brother joins the Polish army. At the age of 22, he got the rank of colonel. He was in command of a division of 10,000 soldiers. And the army decided to send him to the city of Białystok, known to be very anti-Semitic. So he changed his name from Eisenbach to Stanisław Adamowski, as Polish as you can get. And he goes to Białystok. And he was doing the same thing up there. He was in command of a division of soldiers. One day he comes home from his office, and somebody was waiting inside his home as soon as he got in. That was in 1947, 2 years after the Holocaust, after the war. That guy put a bullet in his head and he killed my brother. And the police were so anti-Semitic, they refused to investigate who did it. Now that was in 1947. I left Poland in 1946. So a few of the survivors that were killed in a pogrom in April of 1946. The Polish anti-Semites were hiding a Polish boy and spread the vicious rumor during the Passover time that the Jews kidnapped this boy and used his blood to make matzah. Absolutely incredible. And we decided we had enough of Poland. We are leaving. I was already married. I met my wife in concentration camp. 3 months later, we were out of Poland. But it wasn't that easy, because it was a communist government. They wouldn't let anybody out of the country because they didn't want the people to see how people live in free countries. But there was a Jewish organization called Bricha, and they came to Poland and helped Jews who wanted to get out to go through the border into Czechoslovakia. They bribed the border guards, and in the middle of the night we went into Czechoslovakia and into the free world. Recently I gave a speech to a group of rabbinical students at the Chabad temple, and one of the students asked me the question, do you feel like having revenge? And my answer was, our Jewish tradition is teaching us that one of the greatest achievements of a human being is to make a friend out of an enemy. And I said, no. My revenge is not a traditional revenge. My revenge is that I'm alive, that I live in. That I live in one of the greatest countries that ever existed on this planet, the United States of America. And my revenge is that the white and blue flag with the Star of David is flying proudly. My time for my speech is rather limited, they tell me. So I'll just end up by saying, God bless this great country, the United States of America. God bless the glorious state of Israel. And may God give you blessings wherever you go and whatever you do. Thank you.
Dr. Eisenbach will now take questions. Anybody who wants to ask a question, please come up.
When you ask questions, I would like to ask you, I have a little difficulty with hearing. Speak close to the microphone, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dor. First of all, I wanted to thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. I really appreciate, how hard it might have been for you to tell it and what you went through and telling us about it, because it's really important for us to know and to keep your legacy and your story alive, because our children need to know all what happened in this unfortunate event. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much.
So my question to you is, after everything you went through, after having everything happen to your family, what still made you feel like Hashem was still something that you can still cope with and you believe in and keep your Jewish spirit alive? What gave you the strength to keep continuing to believe?
At one time somebody asked me, how come everybody hates the Jews so much? And my answer was, that is absolutely not true. Anybody who did not hear the story of the King of Denmark, please raise your hand. Well, most of you did not hear the story of the King of Denmark. I consider the Danish people the most civilized people on the planet. When Hitler occupied Denmark, he ordered the Jews to put yellow stars on the outside of their clothing so he could identify them in the streets and send them to Auschwitz. And the King of Denmark said to Hitler, if you are going to do that to our Jewish people, I'm going to put on a yellow star. My entire family would put on a yellow star. And every Dane in the country would put on a yellow star. And you will not be able to tell who is Jewish and who isn't. That's exactly what the Danish people did, and they saved every single Jew. Then the King of Denmark was afraid that Hitler may come up with some other ideas how to identify Jews, so he put them on ships and sent them to Sweden, and Hitler couldn't touch them in Sweden. It was a neutral country. And all Swedish Jews were saved. Did you ever hear the name of Raoul Wallenberg? Raoul Wallenberg came from an aristocratic Swedish family, and he was an ambassador to Hungary, and the Nazis occupied Hungary, and they were just about to ship out 100,000 Jews to the gas chambers. And Mr. Wallenberg single-handedly issued 100,000 Swedish visas to those Jews. So they became instant citizens of Sweden, and Hitler couldn't touch them. Chiyuji Sugihara, a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania, couldn't stand watching what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. So he decided to ask his government for permission to issue 10,000 visas to the Jewish people so they could go to Japan and Far Eastern country where Hitler couldn't reach them. The Japanese were allied with the Nazis and they refused the request. But what did Mr. Sugihara do? He disregarded this denial. He issued the 10,000 visas anyway. As he said it was the right thing to do, knowing full well what his government is going to do to him. They fired him from this job, took him back to Japan with his family, and he lived in poverty and disgrace. Now he's a great humanitarian hero in Japan, and there's a statue in his honor. I had patients who had, their son is an American ambassador to Albania. Albania is a small European country. And I retired about 3 months ago, and the ambassador's mother comes into my office one day and brings me a booklet. And the title of the booklet is "The Albanian People Saved 100% of the Jews." And Albania is made up 90% of Muslims and 10% of Christians. And they were protecting their Jewish citizens from the Nazis. And they couldn't find a single one. Bulgaria did similar things. Poland. There are so many good Polish people who saved Jews. I have a friend who lives in Los Angeles, and he and his family were saved by 2 Polish brothers. In a hole on the ground, they brought them water and food every day. And they survived. If those Polish brothers were found out by the Nazis, they would have killed them. So there were so many humanitarians, you know. We have every reason in the world to submit to anger, but we're not submitting to anger. We have every reason in the world to give up on humanity, but we do not give up on humanity as long as there are humanitarians like the King of Denmark and all the others, and Mr. Gandhi in India. We have faith in God, and we have faith in humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. We can take one more question. Anybody?
Thank you so much for speaking with us. We really, I think everybody here really appreciates it. I'm just curious, can you tell us a little bit about how you met your wife? It seems like how you met your wife, and like you said, you met her in Auschwitz.
How did I make my...
You meet your wife?
How did I meet my wife?
Yeah.
That was in concentration camp. We were in concentration camp. We were working in the munition factory, and I met her there in the munition factory. And a few months after the war, we got married.
Is there any
after I escaped from Poland with my wife, we went to the American zone of Germany. I lived in Frankfurt. I went there because I had some survivors, friends in there. And I enrolled at the university in Frankfurt. That was in 1946. I was there for 4 years. And in 1950 I came to the United States. And that was we moved around quite a bit, but that was the best and greatest move that we have made.